Today's video is going to be very important because we will discuss 6 major questions about the war and try to understand what the future of this conflict might look like. The 6 major questions we will discuss are: 1. Will the United States use nuclear weapons against Iran? If it is possible, then why? And if it is not possible, then why not? 2. What role are Russia and China playing in this war? 3. Why might Russia become the biggest beneficiary of this war, especially because of oil? 4. What losses could the United States face if the war continues for a long period of time? 5. Is there any possibility that this conflict could turn into World War III? 6. What kind of personality does Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, have, and how might his leadership affect the future of the war? Start with first question. Will the United States use nuclear weapons against Iran? Why or why not? In my opinion, it is highly unlikely that the United States would use nuclear weapons against Iran. Although the United States possesses one of the most powerful nuclear arsenals in the world, the political and strategic consequences of using such weapons would be extremely serious. Nuclear weapons are considered the most destructive tools in warfare, and their use would immediately change the nature of the conflict and the global political environment. First of all, if the United States were to use nuclear weapons against Iran, it could create a dangerous precedent for other nuclear powers. In fact, countries such as Russia might use this action as a justification for their own nuclear decisions in other conflicts. For example, Russia is already involved in a major war with Ukraine. The United States and Western countries strongly oppose Russia's potential use of nuclear weapons. However, if the United States itself uses nuclear weapons first in another conflict, it would weaken its moral and political authority to stop others from doing the same. This situation could seriously threaten global stability and increase the risk of nuclear warfare in other regions. Another important factor is the international reputation of the United States. I think that using nuclear weapons would damage America's image as a responsible global leader. Many countries might interpret such an action as a sign that the United States could not defeat Iran through conventional military strategies. Instead of demonstrating strength, it might appear that Iran forced the United States into taking an extreme and desperate step. Furthermore, nuclear weapons cause enormous humanitarian and environmental damage. A nuclear strike would not only destroy military targets, but would also kill a large number of civilians and create long-term environmental consequences. Radiation could affect the region for many years and lead to widespread suffering. Because of this, the international community would likely condemn the United States strongly. Even some of America's allies might distance themselves politically if such an action occurred. Another reason why nuclear weapons are unlikely to be used is that they do not necessarily guarantee political victory. Military conflicts are not solved only through destruction. They also involve political goals and long-term stability. Even if nuclear weapons cause massive damage, they might not solve the deeper political conflict between the United States and Iran. In addition, nuclear weapons are mainly used as deterrents rather than as practical battlefield weapons. Their primary purpose is to prevent war rather than to fight it. Since the end of the Second World War, nuclear powers have generally avoided using them because of the catastrophic consequences. In conclusion, I think the United States will most likely avoid using nuclear weapons against Iran. The risks are simply too great. The decision could destabilize global nuclear norms, damage America's international reputation, cause massive humanitarian destruction, and fail to achieve a clear political victory. For these reasons, nuclear weapons are extremely unlikely to be used in this conflict. 2. What is the role of Russia and China in this war? In my opinion, Russia and China play an indirect but important role in the conflict involving Iran and the United States. Even if they are not directly participating in the fighting, their strategic interests and possible support can significantly influence the situation. Both countries have strong geopolitical reasons to see the United States become involved in a long and costly conflict. One possible role of Russia in this situation is intelligence support. I think that modern warfare heavily depends on accurate information about enemy positions and military assets. If a country has access to advanced intelligence systems, it can help its allies target strategic locations more effectively. Russia has a long history of intelligence operations and strong capabilities in this area. Therefore, It can be argued that Russia may assist Iran by sharing information about important locations or military activities related to the United States. Another potential contribution may come from China, particularly in the area of technology and satellite systems. Modern missile systems and military operations rely heavily on satellite data for navigation, communication, and targeting. If Iran receives satellite-related assistance, it could improve the accuracy of its missile systems and military planning. China has developed significant technological capabilities in space and satellite technology, which could potentially support Iran indirectly. In fact, both Russia and China may prefer that the conflict continues for a long period rather than ending quickly. A prolonged war would force the United States to spend enormous financial and military resources. When a country is deeply involved in a war, it must dedicate much of its attention to that conflict. This situation reduces its ability to focus on other global challenges and rivals. I think history provides a useful example here. The United States spent around 20 years involved in the war in Afghanistan. During that time, a huge amount of money and military energy was invested in the conflict. Meanwhile, China was able to strengthen its economy and gradually become a major global power. Long wars can therefore weaken even the strongest countries if they consume too many resources. For Russia and China, such a situation could be strategically beneficial. While the United States is busy managing a complex conflict in the Middle East, these countries could expand their influence in other parts of the world. Economically, politically, and militarily, they might gain opportunities to strengthen their positions. However, I also think that Russia and China would avoid direct confrontation with the United States. Their strategy is likely based on indirect involvement rather than open military conflict. By providing limited support, intelligence, or diplomatic backing, they can influence the balance of power without risking a direct war with America. In conclusion, Russia and China may not be directly fighting the conflict, but they can still play a significant strategic role. Through intelligence support, technological assistance, and geopolitical strategy, they may indirectly strengthen Iran while benefiting from the strategic challenges faced by the United States. 3. Why might Russia be the main beneficiary of this war? Because of oil. In my opinion, Russia could benefit significantly from a prolonged conflict involving Iran and the United States, especially because of the global oil market. Energy resources play a crucial role in international politics and economics, and any disruption in oil supply can dramatically change the balance of power between energy-producing countries. One of the most important factors in this situation is the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf with the rest of the world, and is one of the most important routes for global oil transportation. Many Middle Eastern countries, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and others, export their oil through this route. If a conflict in the region disrupts or closes this passage, the global supply of oil could be seriously affected. I think that if the Strait of Hormuz becomes unsafe or inaccessible due to war, many oil shipments from the Middle East would face major difficulties reaching international markets. Even if alternative routes are available, they are usually longer and more expensive. As transportation costs increase and supply becomes uncertain, the global price of oil is likely to rise. This situation could create a major opportunity for Russia. Unlike many Middle Eastern countries, Russian oil exports do not depend on the Strait of Hormuz. Russia has different pipelines and export routes that allow it to deliver oil to various markets without relying on this particular choke point. Because of this geographical advantage, Russian oil can continue reaching international buyers even if the Persian Gulf routes are disrupted. Another important factor is global demand for energy. Countries around the world still require oil to support their industries, transportation systems, and economies. If oil supplies from the Middle East become limited or extremely expensive, many countries may start looking for alternative suppliers. In such a situation, Russia could become a more attractive option for buyers. Higher demand for Russian oil would naturally increase its value. As global prices rise, Russia would earn more revenue from its energy exports. Since oil and gas are key sources of income for the Russian economy, this increase in revenue could significantly strengthen Russia's economic position. In addition, a prolonged conflict would extend these benefits over time. The longer the war continues, the longer the global oil market may remain unstable. This instability could keep oil prices high and maintain strong demand for alternative suppliers, such as Russia. For these reasons, I think Russia could become one of the biggest beneficiaries of the conflict, even if it is not directly involved in the fighting. Disruptions in global oil supply and rising energy prices could strengthen Russia economically and strategically. For what losses could the United States face if the war continues for a long time? In my opinion, a long-term war between the United States and Iran could create serious economic, political, and strategic challenges for the United States. History shows that prolonged conflicts often weaken even the most powerful countries because they require enormous financial resources and military commitment. One of the most immediate losses would be financial. Modern warfare is extremely expensive. Military operations require advanced weapons, aircraft, intelligence systems, and logistical support. Maintaining these resources over a long period can cost billions of dollars. If the war continues for many years, the financial burden on the United States could become very heavy. Another important problem is the diversion of resources and attention. When a country becomes deeply involved in a war, it must focus a large portion of its military and political energy on that conflict. This can reduce its ability to deal with other global issues. While the United States is occupied with a difficult war, other countries may use the opportunity to strengthen their own positions. I think the example of the Afghanistan war is particularly relevant. The United States remained involved in Afghanistan for about 20 years. During that period, enormous resources were spent on military operations and reconstruction efforts. At the same time, other countries, particularly China, continued to expand their economies and increase their global influence. This shows how long wars can gradually shift the balance of power in international politics. A prolonged conflict could also affect the reputation of the United States as a global superpower. Iran has faced heavy economic sanctions for many years and does not possess the same level of military resources as the United States. If such a country manages to keep the United States engaged in a long and difficult war, it may create the impression that American power is not as dominant as it once appeared. Another challenge involved the uncertainty of achieving a clear victory. Military success does not always lead to political success. Even large-scale military operations may not produce the desired political outcome, especially in complex regional conflicts. Finally, long wars often create domestic political pressure. Citizens may begin to question the cost, purpose, and human consequences of the conflict. Public opinion can influence political decisions and create internal debates about foreign policy. In conclusion, I think a prolonged war with Iran could lead to major losses for the United States. These losses may include enormous financial costs, reduced global influence, damage to its reputation as a superpower, and the strengthening of rival countries that take advantage of the situation. 5. Could this conflict turn into World War III? In my opinion, the possibility of this conflict turning into World War III exists, but the chances are still relatively low. The main reason is that powerful countries such as Russia and China appear to be supporting Iran indirectly rather than openly entering the war. This situation is different from the relationship between the United States and Israel, where the United States openly provides strong military and political support. Because Russia and China are staying in the background, the conflict has not yet expanded into a direct confrontation between the major global powers. However, the situation could change if Russia or China decided to participate directly in the war. If any of these major powers enter the conflict openly on Iran's side, the scale of the war would immediately increase. In such a situation, it would no longer be a regional conflict, but a confrontation between powerful global blocs. On one side, there would likely be the United States and its allies, and on the other side, Russia, China, and countries that align with them. Once multiple major powers and their alliances become involved, the risk of the war expanding into a global conflict would increase significantly. Another important factor is the issue of political prestige and legacy. When powerful countries enter a war directly, it becomes very difficult for them to step back. If a major power withdraws from a conflict after committing its resources and reputation, it may be seen as weak in the international system. Because of this, leaders often feel pressure to continue the conflict rather than retreat. If Russia, China, or the United States were to engage directly against each other, none of them would want to appear weak in front of the world. Furthermore, alliances could cause the war to spread quickly. The United States has many military allies around the world, including NATO members and other strategic partners. If the United States became involved in a direct war with another major power, many of its allies might join the conflict. At the same time, Russia and China also have partners and friendly governments that could support them. This chain reaction of alliances could gradually expand the conflict to multiple regions. Despite these possibilities, I still think the chances of World War III remain limited because major powers understand the catastrophic consequences of a global war, especially when nuclear weapons exist. For this reason, they often prefer indirect involvement rather than direct confrontation. 6. Personality of Iran's new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei. In my opinion, Mojtaba Khamenei is considered a very influential and hardline political figure in Iran. For many years, he remained active behind the scenes in Iranian politics and developed strong connections with powerful institutions within the country. Even though he did not hold many official public positions, he was widely seen as an important figure within the political system. Mojtaba is known to have strong ties with Iran's powerful military organization, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, which plays a major role in Iran's security and political structure. These connections have given him considerable influence within the country's political and military networks. Because the IRGC is one of the most powerful institutions in Iran, its support can significantly strengthen a leader's authority. Another important aspect of Mojtaba's personality is his reputation as a hardliner. Many analysts believe that his political views may be even more rigid than those of his father. Hardline leaders usually adopt a strong stance against external pressure and prefer resistance rather than compromise. Because of this approach, some observers believe that under his leadership, Iran may take a more aggressive or determined position in regional conflicts. Mojtaba has also been described as a powerful figure who worked behind the scenes for many years as an advisor and gatekeeper within the leadership structure. His long involvement in political decision-making allowed him to build networks with military commanders, political elites, and ideological organizations inside the country. For these reasons, many people believe that Mojtaba Khamenei could lead Iran with a strong and uncompromising approach. If his leadership follows a hardline path, it may also make ongoing conflicts more prolonged and difficult to resolve.